also?
Yeah,
Because
of course.
it happens already. Okay.
Yes. Now we are
Hi,
recording.
everybody. I am Anne Sterks. I am based in Belgium, eco-psychologist, and I have an IES school earthwise education. And I'm so honored I can present to you this evening my dear friend, also Michéal Connors from the Natural Academy. And Michéal is, I think your name is so difficult to say it totally right. Michéal.
Michéal, yeah.
Michéal, I like to practice, is an eco-psychologist, a mountain leader, and holistic health and well-being professional. He is qualified psychotherapist, supervisor, and lecturer. He has a specialist interest in nature-based approaches to holistic cancer care and mental health. For over 25 years, Michéal has been advocating and developing nature-based and holistic approaches to mental and physical health. And together with Rhonda, his partner, he started the organization Natural Academy, whose mission is to help people and nature recover and flourish together. How beautiful is that, huh? Oh yes, a very important thing that touched me when I met Michéal some years ago. He is also a certified wild mind guide, and he has trained many years with Bill Plotkin at Animas Valley Institute. And he's also a father, grandfather, and a great musician, I can tell you. And he is also a songwriter and poet. So, and about his organization, Natural Academy, I'm really a fan of it. They train practitioners who facilitate the health, healing, and recovery of people. And within the journey of this, they support their return to deepening connectedness to the natural world. They have a vision of an integrated, ecocentric One Health model. And the One Health model is more a streaming and academic way to look to the connection between nature and humans and nature, plant, animals, and humans. In their health, we are all connected. They have, from this, their approaches and applied eco-psychology emerge to support individuals, communities, and the rest of the natural world around us. So their mission is to create competent and confident professionals in nature-based approaches to health, healing, and deeper purpose. And as such, they know they can help many, many others engage once again with the resources of their natural self and their connectedness to nature. And with these words, I would like to open this place for Michéal.
Thank you, Anne. It's lovely to see you again. I was thinking of Belgium and the lovely time I had over there meeting you, and you're going up to do some interesting conversations, and it's a real pleasure to be asked. I really thank you all for coming here and offering me this space to share some thoughts, ideas around what we're up to. So I've been told by Elena and Anne that basically the way this is roughly going to work is that I'll talk for a while. I've got a presentation, I'll share some slides, some ideas. And as we're going along, I'm very open to chat, questions, or then we can have some time at the end if there are any questions that people want to ask about what I present. And when I was forming the presentation, what I realized was that, of course, eco-psychology is always emerging. It's always changing. It's never, every time I articulate it, something's been moved in me that's made it slightly different. So I'm really excited by just sharing these ideas. And I absolutely know I don't have the answers. I just have the conversation with you all, and look forward to all of your inputs and ideas, and honor all of your own wisdoms and knowledge. But want to start with a little bit of a sharing. So I'm going to share the screen. Oh yeah, before we do that, I was just wondering if we could take a moment, if everyone's okay with this, to take a moment to just arrive here together, arrive in just a moment of connection. Firstly, taking that moment to connect to this interior self, this inner self of whoever we are, this moment, what's emerging, our body, our heart, our being, and feeling our feet on the ground and just noticing that connection to wherever you are in the world, feeling that place that is there around you, the beings of the land, the landscapes, the biosphere of your own space, and feeling into this community of people curious about this conversation of eco-psychology, and sensing into us arriving together as a sharing space and a place where we can explore, be curious, learn together. Just taking that moment to arrive. Take a few breaths as we come together. And I'm going to start with a little bit of music, actually. I thought that would be one way to begin. So I'm going to share a screen of Northern Ireland. I wanted to share this me, this self thing that I am, and my journey of coming here a little bit. And to do that, I also wanted to play a little Irish tune to arrive together. So hopefully this isn't too screechy. You might need to turn down your music, and it's a song that is just a welcome, but it's a lament as well, a lament for the loss of our hearts and our communities. You can see the imagery of Northern Ireland, the war in Northern Ireland that continued for many years and continued in its own way. Sort of colonial powers that fought there, and the swirl of the Celtic spirit that still swirls in me, and that's me and my brother and my sisters. I'd just fallen off a bike, so I had a plaster on my face, and that was in the 1970s, in the middle of all this conflict. So just wanting, and then all of it in this amazing setting of the Giant's Causeway, which is in Northern Ireland. Such a beautiful place, incredible place, really amazing. So I'll just play a quick tune and then dive in. So that tune is a tune called The Passing of the Gale. And for me, the passing of the gale, it means two things. One is the passing of a storm. And like this imagery shows, maybe after a storm, as the sun breaks through. But also the Gael were the people of Ireland, the Gael, the Celts. They were called the Gael, and the people of Northern Ireland and Scotland especially, the Gael people, the Gaelic people. So the passing of the Gael also speaks to me of that. So the passing of the Celtic folk soul and how it survived in Ireland in the music and in the people, in the poetry, in the story. And that deep interconnection, like the imagery that the Celts used, our interconnectedness, intraconnectedness, how that survived through the people and through the arts. And that's really an introduction to what I want to be talking about today, which is really an exploration of what we're calling the natural self and the healing dwelling place. And I guess the natural self healing dwelling place arises from that loss in me, or that disconnect that has happened in our, maybe it's particularly westernized or modern cultural paradigm, and the disconnect from our innate way of being in the world. And in this exploration, I'll be looking at a number of different things, and I'll go as quickly as I can through them. But one thing we'll explore is the idea of what we mean by eco-psychology. So we have a particular take on that as Natural Academy and have a particular way of looking at that. We're also going to look at, well, what is the natural self? What is natural self? Is there a way of defining that, or is there, a way to explore it? We'll also look at how we adapt to survive, create a self apart. So the self apart, a self that is not connected or is in disconnect. Where does this leave us? And then we'll explore ecotherapy. And we have a particular way of understanding the word ecotherapy as healing dwelling place. And we like the metaphorical process of that. It's also going back to more of the etymology, the history of, and the sort of Greek roots of the words. And then we'll look at the natural self interconnected. We'll also briefly explore our model of practice. So we have a particular model that we've been exploring over the last 4 or 5 years called the natural self or nest model. One thing that's been emerging, and this has sort of emerged from the psychedelic world as well, is around interconnectedness and measuring interconnectedness, which is an interesting thing. So I want to have a brief look at that. And finish with the sort of role of ecotherapists, because one of the things that we as the Academy are up to is really wanting to establish ecotherapy within, standard mental health systems, having it really acknowledged as like art therapy or music therapy are acknowledged. So we've been around for actually 15 years. This was a while back, and we're not for profit social enterprise, and we, I don't need to go into too much because Anne covered it, but we have a mission, and as a not-for-profit, it's all about helping people connect to nature and ultimately supporting nature as well. So very much a reciprocal approach. We've set up a pathway. This is our what's called a vocational pathway. So we go back to the word vocational, like calling, voca, and being called to work with people in nature. And we've been running this now for about 5 years, right through. So it's a 3.5-year program with the intention of, at the end of it, people coming out supported to develop their practice and start to work, which has been happening, which is really exciting. We also generate eco-psychology into what we call the 3 realms of practice. And really the reason that's come in is that, one, it's such a vast study. I mean, eco-psychology could mean the study of everything, doesn't it? It really does. It's the universe, really. And so therefore we wanted to find ways to focus our intentional facilitation, because otherwise it can go anywhere. It's so deep and profound our connectedness to nature, and our journey with the natural world, our own nature. Of course, we are nature. I know that's a false separation, but that is such a deep journey. We wanted to find ways. So we created these three lenses. And again, this came back to my Celtic roots with the tryst, this three spiraling interconnectedness. And we've really explored nature, health, and well-being as a specific realm of practice. Then we explore wholeness, healing, and growth ecotherapy as a particular realm of practice. And we explore deeper nature with the sort of transpersonal elements of ecopsychology in that other realm of practice. So, but all three are there all the time, and all three are interconnected. It's not like, and there's no hierarchy, none are better than the other. They're all important parts of our whole being and our whole health. So we talked about looking at a definition. So we wanted to go back to ecopsychology, and maybe some of you are greater scholars than me on this, but this is where we've gone with it. But the word eco and ikios, home, household, but also I've seen dwelling place. So we like that word, dwelling place. It's a very beautiful way to express something in English. And then psyche, mind, spirit, soul, psyche itself, whatever psyche is, the mystery of psyche, the huge and interconnected nature of psyche, and ology. Like to explore ecopsychology as is the study of the dwelling place of psyche. And that for us is an interesting way to metaphorically come to the conversation. And it allows us to come into some strong imagery like this one. This is our imagery of the natural self. And we hold that this is our innate way of being. This is our nature, to be this interconnected organism, expanding, growing, developing, adapting, moving, constantly changing, with many ways that we are relating and interconnected with in ourselves and with the human and the other than human, and with deeper mystery of ourselves in our soul work or in our connection to something greater, universal mystery. And we call this our dwelling place. This is where we dwell. This is our given, our innate human given to have this. And it is our right to have it. And in many ways, that has been taken from us for whatever reasons. But it's a relational, holistic, systemic emergence. So it's a very, complex system that we are. And so therefore, and this is obviously just the map, the territory is more complex, but it's one way that we can at least come into conversation. Again, models, that's all they're useful for, isn't it? Is just to keep conversations and to allow us to be on a similar page in that conversation. But this is our natural self as we define it. And of course, mostly our experience, certainly in the West, and certainly from my experience of growing up in Northern Ireland, was that some of this was allowed, but most of my being was cut short, was for whatever reasons taken and shut down and boxed away. And I had to survive. I had to survive a war. I had to survive a war in a community. I had to survive a war in my family. I had to survive the war of life, it felt like, around the human world. The greater global war of the Russian-American War, the Second World War. There was all of this war still going on somewhere, and colonial imperialism. And all of that certainly wasn't allowing me to flourish into this old self. So of course, what I've had to do, like all of us, was generate what we're calling here the self apart. So instead of this relational organismic being that is constantly emerging and in open relatedness to the world, to everything, I had to generate many parts to survive. So, and find ways to stay very much in myself as a safe place, or felt safe. It was dead in some ways, but it was safe. So the idea of the adaptation of walling ourselves in, and a greater expression of that is that sort of we become egocentric in our identity and belonging. So that sense of ourself as, you know, that's all we are, that's all where my identity is, it's just me. And I have to survive or get what I want in this world. So that sense of an egocentric identity and belonging was very much my experience as well. As I generated many self parts to survive and continue, those are there with me now because they were important adaptations and I honor them. I respect their part in the whole system. But, you know, they were about survival. They weren't about flourishing. And to do this, I had to be apart from my body, heart, and soul, because I couldn't feel, you know, that was something that was either not allowed. I was genderized as a male, so men not allowed to feel things, certainly in our culture. You know, they had to be strong, stiff upper lip, whatever the English phrases are. I'm sure you have them in your own culture. And I had to stay in some ways apart from people, you know, not trusting, feeling separate, feeling disconnected, struggling in competition and fear. And of course, apart from the rest of nature. So this self that ultimately is generated, this part of cells, you know, is in a dead and inanimate world. It's a pretty tricky place to be, and I know it in me, and I know it in many others who I work with, and you know, as they arrive in our courses or in our journeys in ecotherapy, arriving very much in places like this. And of course, that disconnection of mind, body, spirit, soul leads to a crisis of isolation and social disconnection, and the crisis and disconnection from nature. All of that formed and shaped by that sense of ourself as separate and apart from the rest of everything else, that natural self. And so what we've been working at is really finding ways to meet that in whatever ways we can, to really find ways through applied ecopsychology, through models of practice, through community gatherings, through generating a community of practice, all of it as a way of helping us come back to connection and back to living connection, and finding ways to help us come out of isolation and exclusion. And within that, inevitably, finding ways to be with the destruction of the ecological and the loss that we're dealing with, and the planetary health that we're holding as a stewardess, you know, the stewards of the human race that hold this at the moment. How do we all come back to an interconnection? How do we come back? Hello? So one way that we have been working over many times is really integrating and honoring. So Indigenous knowledge and wisdom. So the training I did in America, obviously within the American culture, was influenced by Native American, South American, and North American ideas. I mean, of course it was. And, not wanting to appropriate those ideas. Obviously, I also tapped into my own indigenous roots in the sense of my Celtic tradition, but also, there is a truth in honoring all of the indigenous knowledge and wisdom that both we have in us and have in the European culture, but across all cultures, and remembering what indigenous knowledge and wisdom is, our deep interconnectedness, our deep capacity to be one with all, our understanding of the personal, social, and ecological. And then also contemplative traditions and practices, which also that picture of Karanis is from the Gudenstrop cauldron in Denmark. It's a Celtic cauldron. And there's a deep contemplative tradition in the Celtic tradition as well, and an understanding of that, but also then, of course, the really deep understandings that come from the ways before in the East and the Taoist traditions and the other traditions that also really feed into all that we understand in ecopsychology as it emerges as a study. And then modern science and how modern science is also driving ecopsychology, really finding ways to show interconnectedness, to show that we are all one, to show again that there is a web of life that we're all participating in. And then modern psychology, so all of the great traditions of depth psychology and transpersonal psychology, which also, so all of this feeds into some of what we're feeding into our work, about interconnected growth, emergence, core complexity in systems, wholeness, cyclical, spiraling, fractal-like, self-similar. All of these are emerging from all of those great traditions, from science, from the indigenous traditions, from the contemplative traditions, from psychology, modern psychology. Yeah. So we started working with this idea of holding, healing, and growth. So wholeness, coming back to wholeness, feels really important if we're coming back to a sense of an interconnected being. And so much in our psychology, and certainly in my experience as a psychotherapist, was really about working with the healing. It wasn't really working with wholeness. So one of the ways that we really work is we come to wholeness first. Let's explore wholeness. What is wholeness? How do we experience wholeness? And then healing. How do we help those parts of us that are disconnected, in trauma, in separation? How do we help restore ourselves through a healing journey? And then growth, expanding into this emergence of our natural self, coming home to who we really are. And this is where the ecotherapy model comes in. So we see that healing is an intraconnected process. My healing affects the social, affects the ecological, and vice versa. There's a journey of reciprocity. And actually, that's a really important differentiation between an ecotherapeutic model and a psychotherapeutic model, where you have a more traditional human-centered psychology. The fact that the healing of Earth is also us healing, and that our healing has an impact on Earth's healing because we are Earth. That interconnected reciprocity is where we see as healing dwelling place. So this is like our dwelling place where we can heal when we have all three elements, the personal, the social, and the ecological, interconnected together. We need all three to really heal. And so we end up with connectedness as the key, connectedness to inner experience. So from that disconnected self, any connection. So when we're working with people, helping them come back into that interoception and interconnectedness, connected to you, to the relational field, to the human, and the other than, or to the a sense of the human relationship, and of course to the other than human, expanding the sense of the ecological self. And so an interconnected consciousness is where we have what we call holocation of identity and belonging across all three. So we have a way of knowing consciously that we are interconnected, and that's quite a thing to explore. What does that feel like? What is the experience of that? How does it show up in our lives? How does our identity shift deeply when we come into that shift of consciousness to a sense of interconnected identity and belonging, and knowing that we are interconnected across all of this? And we move from an egocentric to an ecocentric viewpoint, where we are universe, we are earth, we are human, we are the inner world of ourselves, we are soul. We are all of that in a union. So some of the ways that we work: wholeness, engaging with plural minds. So the idea of some of the ideas of parts and IFS and other, I think so we work with the wild mind quite a lot. Healing, how do we heal our whole self? Connection to the natural self across the PSC field. Growth. So we have models and templates of practice that we can help practitioners have a framing system so that they can help understand where their participants, we call them participants, are in that journey of connection and interconnection. And so we might take them on phases, where phase one, someone might arrive and they are very disconnected, from any sense of themselves. They might have a connection to nature, but they don't have a way to relate to humans very well. So that phase one for someone like that might, it's a journey of understanding that they are, they have an inner world, they have a connection, and that might take years, of course, but like it does in standard psychotherapy. But something about nature shifts things so easily and quickly in a way that in a room with another person, it doesn't happen so well. And then deepening wholeness and healing, phase two. So really coming into a sense of their wholeness, that they have a personal, social, ecological identity, that is an interconnected whole, that they can lean into nature, they can trust the human more. They have an inner world that matters and that has meaning and purpose, has validity, has agency. And then phase three is really wholeness, healing. And we work with the wild mind here as well. And that's really wild mind map of the psyche, which is Bill Hawkins' map. But we know that not everyone is ready for that, because it works with archetypes and it works with sort of quite complex psychological processes. So we might take people on a journey to that, rather than diving straight into it with some people where it may be overwhelming or just too complex. So those are the three phases that we work with the idea of this natural self emerging across the personal and social and ecological, and how that develops over time, developing our identity, our sense of belonging. And one of the things that we've started to work with is measuring interconnectedness. So we're working with the Watts connectedness scale. And this is a particular scale developed, as I say, by Rosalind Watts. She's a nature connection scientist who's come out of the psychedelic world. She was very much involved in Imperial College in London, which has been doing sort of deep psychedelic trials. And one of the things that's come out of the psychedelic evidence base is how important connection is, and that connection is what emerges through those experiences. And so she's developed this connectedness scale as a way of us exploring intraconnectedness. I'm curious to see how we might one day have that sort of evidence, or have that way to present it. because it could become, again, what we want to do is have ecotherapists as allied health professionals. We want ecotherapists to be, taken seriously within the mental health systems within the UK, and having those types of scales and measures and ways to articulate practice feels like a really useful and beneficial thing for us all. So I was going to stop there. There's quite a lot. I know there's a lot in that already, but just thought I'd stop and see if there's any questions, comments, challenges.
Hi, Michéal.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Nice to hear you from Italy. Hello to everyone. A lot of people from Greece. Great. And from Italy also.
Great. Hi, Marcella.
I have a question that's actually it's a question that we are asking to each other within the IES group of representatives that relates to the work ecotherapy. In your school or in Great Britain, where do you work? Is it a name that just for psychotherapists, or is it the name for whoever works in activity of reconnection with nature? That's what we call ecotuner.
Yeah. It's currently used in both ways. Probably it's used as a more generic term to describe sort of general, any reconnection to nature process that brings people back. And then it's also used within a more professional frame of a therapeutic intervention. So one of the things we're working with, we have a network called the Nature and Health Practice Network, is we're looking at defining some of this a little bit for us so that there's clarity of intention when we use that language. And my preference, this is my own personal preference, is that the word ecotherapist is a recognized profession where we're working with the healing of another human being within nature. Now, one of the issues that happened here in the UK is that when people have used the word come to our ecotherapy session, there's an unconscious initiation of the therapeutic process, healing. So people come expecting that, and the parts of them that are seeking healing will want that. And the facilitators aren't necessarily offering healing. They might be doing things like making something, and you're not going into the sort of healing of the person's process. So I think it can get confusing for participants as well as for professionals. So I think there's a desire to find clarity in the language. And I'm sure it's the same for all of you. It's probably very similar in every country at the moment.
Yes. Do you know how this process of clarity is moving in the Anglo-Saxon world? Which direction is taking, more in one or in the other?
I think it's moving more towards the sort of professionalization of the word. I think it has been in the sort of more generic place for quite a while. And more that's been called nature and health, or nature, health, and well-being. And there's a discernment. So one of the reasons we did the 3 realms of practice, if I go, one of the reasons we talked about the 3 realms was that we were aware that when I mean, this is from my own experience as well, when I go into nature and I'm facilitated, all sorts of things can open up, because you get into such a deep depth of conversation, with the earth, and it moves us into deep, soulful, spiritual journeys, And at the same time, the person facilitating may not have any skill to hold that. And they often don't. And our experience was we were opening up to these depths and they were doing maybe even ceremony and they didn't know how to integrate it or hold it. So one of the things we did was really define sort of areas of practice so that the facilitators, the practitioners could be confident and competent in that realm. So the same with nature, health, and well-being. They don't have to be then therapists. They don't have to have therapeutic sort of background or deep understanding to facilitate resourcefulness or restoration, resilience. You know, we use those sort of languages in the nature, health, and well-being realm. So it's more about restoration. It's more positive psychology. It's more helping people gather resources for themselves. While ecotherapy, we're saying is more like, okay, let's go into the healing here. Let's go into your story of recovery from that self apart, back to your wholeness, back to your interconnection, back to your connection to all things. And that's a deep healing for all of us. I know it is for me. So I think we're moving towards ecotherapy as a professional word for an ecotherapist.
Marchéala, você poderia me traduzir?
Sim,
Acho que eu vou precisar falar em português. Tá
vai.
bom?
Tá.
Primeiro, achei muito importante. Bom, primeiro de tudo, obrigado pela apresentação. Eu gostei demais de toda a sua colocação. Vejo
First
muita
of all,
profundidade no seu trabalho.
Marco wants to thank you for your presentation. That was very clear and very deep.
Okay, thank you.
Segundo, eu gostaria de agradecer a pergunta que a Marchéala fez, porque esse tem sido tema de reflexão dentro da IES.
And then I want to thank the questions as Marchéala did, because it's an element of reflection within the association.
Como a literatura de fala inglesa tem trazido esse tema ecotherapy, nós nos defrontamos na prática com os limites entre uma ecopsicoterapia e uma ecoterapia, que seria trabalho mais de crescimento pessoal.
Since the English literature brought up this word ecotherapy, we are experimenting the problem of distinguish among an eco-psychotherapy, as you said before, and just a more general eco-tuning, what we call the facilitating reconnection and well-being. And
aqui no Brasil, por exemplo, nós sentimos a necessidade de diferenciar essas duas áreas, a ecoterapia e a ecopsicoterapia, mas da forma como nós entendemos ecoterapia, que significa que não necessariamente um psicoterapeuta a pratica, o ecotuner pode ser considerado um ecoterapeuta.
Here in Brazil, we are keeping the two levels separated. So therapy is for eco-psychotherapy, but actually what we are noticing that was what in the literature is called ecotherapy is exactly what we called eco-tuning.
Yeah.
Existem implicações importantes para isso, porque nós chamamos o ecotuner, mas não necessariamente no âmbito da IES reconhecemos a prática do ecotuning como uma prática de ecoterapia oficialmente falando.
That's very important for us because we are talking about ecotuner and ecotuning, but we don't recognize it as ecotherapy officially.
Mm-hmm.
E ainda fica mais complexa a situação, porque sempre que a gente trabalha com crescimento pessoal em contato com a natureza, a própria natureza faz aflorar de conteúdos muito profundos.
See, and that the question is even more complicated because every time we work with personal growth in nature, well, nature makes very deep and powerful processes.
Aqui nós tivemos, na formação do Brasil, nós tivemos suficientes exemplos de que a prática do ecotuner ou do ecoterapeuta levanta questões que são próprias para uma psicoterapia.
Here we saw in our training that practices that we defined of eco-tuning or can be defined as ecotherapy actually enters in issues that are connected with eco-psychotherapy.
Ao ponto de nós precisarmos introduzir no currículo do International Training intervenções em emergências psicológicas e intervenções em emergências psiquiátricas junto com primeiros socorros em áreas remotas.
That brought us to put in our programs how to deal with psychological emergencies, how to deal with psychiatric emergencies, together with how to deal with first aid.
Sim. Então, obrigado pelas suas considerações. Acho que nós vamos continuar aprofundando esse assunto. Se você quiser falar mais alguma coisa a respeito, seria bem interessante.
So it's very interesting for us what the theme you brought us, and we will sure continue deepening it together. But if you want to add something, we are eager to listen.
Obrigado, Michéal.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, because one of the things I'm really interested in, because my background's in psychotherapy, so I was a person-centered psychotherapist, but holistic, so I worked with body as well. And one of the things I'm really curious about is like the word eco-psychotherapy. What makes that different to psychotherapy? You know, because where is the difference, right? And I guess that's why we've ended up in this etymology of healing dwelling place. There's something in that metaphorical phrase that speaks to eco-psychotherapy, if we call it that, ecotherapy, that is very different to a human-centered psychotherapy. You know, it's generating a different field of relational process. And it's because our recovery to our wholeness requires nature. Otherwise, we could do some healing work as humans to humans, but without the natural world coming into that, then I know we're not in wholeness, we're not interconnected. There's something about intraconnection that is key to ecotherapy. Like, I am Earth, I am you, I am me, we are all one. There is something about coming back to that interconnectedness that is very different to, say, working as a psychotherapist with trauma or with relational issues and attachment issues or whatever, you know. Not that they aren't there, because they're there in the social field, you know, they're part of the wholeness of the personal, social, and ecological. They're there, and there's a lot of healing to be done in the human to human experience, you know, because we are all wounded by each other and traumatized by each other. But without that sort of resonance of the whole field, the personal, social, ecological, and intraconnection, then I think that's what defines ecotherapy. And I think that's different. That's a different psychological process. Of course, we have to do it because we have been taken away from our indigenous knowing of that. And maybe indigenous knowing people don't need that so much, but we need it. You know? So there's something of that definition, I think, is really important in the future of ecotherapy as a professional therapeutic process. Irene?
And Antonio also. There are two people.
Okay.
Okay. So, Antonio?
I came second, so I will go next.
Okay.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello from Rome, Italy. And I'm very grateful for this talk and this presentation, because for me that I'm new, it's been a very great summary. And also thank to Michéal for having introduced me to this fascinating world of the ecopsychology. My question is very specific because you mentioned that the essence of the ecotherapy is trying to heal and to bring all the different parts to a sort of unity. So the question is, do you refer to a particular theoretical framework to do this work? Maybe you mentioned it, IFS, internal family system, is this or other approach of letting all those different parts come together in a ecological, healthy way? Thank you.
Yes, so what we call our NEST model, natural self ecotherapy model, has its roots in theories and the map of the psyche by Bill Plotkin, which I don't know if anyone knows, within Wild Mind. And within Wild Mind, you have what are called the facets of wholeness, which are particular archetypes of wholeness. And then you have the parts. Okay, so that the integration of parts. So the idea that we have a plural mind is foundational to our understanding of ecopsychology. We see ourselves as systemic. We're systemic beings. We have a multitude of parts to ourselves, you know, and that is inherent in our model of practice, is that we are a system. So there are many ways to look at that. Even Freud looked at that with ego, id, superego. That was 3 parts, you know, in competition with each other. So it's always been there in most of the literature in psychology. Internal family systems theory has taken the work of parts to a really refined space. And I think they offer a really crafted and well-honed and evidenced way to work with parts that really honors the parts. But in Bill's map also, that's also in there. You know, there's a deep honoring of all our parts and a deep honoring of our wound and the fact that we've had to generate survival mechanisms, defense mechanisms, whatever we want to define parts as, you know, because we had to survive, like I said at the beginning of my story. So that, so we lean into all of that literature. And so our students study that and often have therapy in that as well. Yeah.
Irene. Yeah.
Yes. Hi, thank you. Thank you for your presentation very much. I recently came across the Wild Mind map, so it was very good timing that I'm also here today. I wanted to ask you whether this concept you brought up, the self apart, can be understood also in terms of the subpersonalities in the work of Bill Plotkin. So
yeah,
is it something similar?
Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, if we look at how we psychically create parts, so when we're overwhelmed, I mean, there's a certain adaptive element to parts that are necessary to be social beings. So in our wholeness, we would have parts because we would have to function within community, and we need socially, you know, capable parts to be in society. But when they become, if you like, when they become pathological or they become diseased, is when they're often created in trauma, and they're often created with overwhelm, where we can't survive the loss of love or the attack or the abuse or whatever. So we create parts to survive, and these parts become our personality. And so when I speak of the self apart, I'm meaning the whole of that personality that is made up of many parts. It's made up of many sub-personalities, parts, whatever we call these elements of our psychology that keep us safe, that help hold us in survival and come in to defend us and support us or help us escape or whatever they do. It's basic survival. So yes, it is the parts. The self apart is the parts. It is the sub-personalities.
Yeah. I found it very profound how you defined psyche as split by trauma and adaptation. So maybe it doesn't always have to do with trauma with capital T. Maybe adaptation is also a reason why psyche has been split.
Yeah, I think it's necessary. Is that there's beautiful adaptations, you know, to be functional as a whole community. There can be beautiful crafted, but when they're more in wholeness, for us, they're more about coming from a place of love and compassion and sharing and caring, and you know, they're not coming from survival and defense and fear and, you know, competition and control and overpowering. So the adaptations can be very beautifully crafted as ways to support the person and community and earth, you know. So yeah, it's a natural way the psyche loves complexity, doesn't it? You know, like the universe loves complexity. It just loves diversity and complexity. It just keeps creating more and more and more of it. You know, you could say the whole journey of the universe has been a journey of complexifying, and psyche is universe. I mean, psyche is complexity. So it's very natural.
Christina is asking, so we learn to accept the different parts and heal the parts that are wounded?
Yeah, we learn to accept all our parts, Christina. Yeah, so the wounded parts have to come home. They're often seen in the literature as exiled or abandoned parts of us, that, you know, the wounded ones. So they come back. So in the Wild Mind map, you've got in the south, you have the wounded parts that come home. Like we welcome them home, but we need wholeness. We need like a village, you know, welcoming home those that are wounded. So yes, absolutely. And that's the healing. The healing is being in relation to. So when we talked earlier about the healing journey is all about connection. It's connecting again. You know, the dis-ease is disconnect, it's disrelation. So when we bring our parts home, we're bringing them back into relatedness, and then they come back into wholeness. They're embraced again. And they'll always be there. It's not like they disappear. They're always parts of us, and we always stay in relation to them, and they grow, and sometimes they can be in the literature reassigned, or they're offered, they find new ways to be in the world that are more supportive and less stuck in some sort of old pattern. But they're there. So yes, absolutely. Accepting all that we are is the key. That's our wholeness, when we can come to that truth of all, acceptance of all that we are.
If I can add something here, in the Italian school, and we use the same model in the Brazilian school and in the Spanish one, we have a program that we call Planet I, that use the metaphor of we are wide and with some different shapes as a planet, and this planet has a lot of inhabitants, and we have to learn how to make friendship with all the inhabitants. Learning how to create good relationship inside as a training to be able to create good relationship outside. And then to learn that we are something more than all the inhabitants. We are the Lord of the planet.
I like that. Planet I like that. Yeah. Yeah, we're amazing. No, the human psyche is incredible. You know, one of the things I see all the time working with people is just, you know, just really blown away by the human, you know, by who we are. When we remember who we are, we come back to our wholeness and our fullness. We are an incredible creature, like all creatures. No better, no worse. Like a jellyfish is an incredible creature. So are the humans.
can I ask something else just before closing? You were talking about interconnection, and you said it's possible to measure interconnection. How do you do it?
Well, it's a questionnaire that they've developed and we're working with now. We're just beginning to bring this into our work, and we're really interested in it. So if you're interested, there's a paper written by let's check, Rosalind Watts. I can share it again if you want, just to
Or
show
if you
you.
can write it in the chat exactly.
Yeah, okay, I can do it there. That's the name of the the paper is called the Watts Connectedness Scale. It's named after her. I went to see her recently there, and you know, she's a psychologist by background, sort of a traditional psychologist, and but you know, she's a lot of really interesting things to say. Her and another guy who was there, who's also on this paper, Sam Gandhi. So I really it's called it's called the Watts Connectedness Scale. So if you look that up, it's downloadable, it's free PDF you can get. But I think it's a really interesting way for us as eco-psychologists to begin to think about measuring what we do.
Yes, that's one of the aim we have as IES, to start to collecting data, since we are 9 school, and from today we are 10 school because we add the Israeli school. Great. And more school are coming, and the idea is to have some measuring tools that can be shared in order to collect a huge amount of data. Yeah. And then we can start to do a serious research.
Yeah, great.
Okay, thank you, Angie. And put the link and Michéal, the name exactly. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Great.